Asian hate. No U.S. bases in Australia. No U.S. bases in Australia. My name is Steve Zeltzer. I'm a member of the CWA, Pacific Media Workers Guild, and also with the United Front Committee for a Labour Party. And the rally we're having today in front of the Australian consulate is in conjunction with an action that's taking place in Port Kembla in Australia against the construction of a U.S. nuclear submarine base. And we believe that the American people, working people, the unions need to oppose this militarization in Australia and in Asia. It's a threat to the world. And also, it's money that should be going for homeless people in San Francisco, for health care, for education, is being used for really a war drive by the United States to surround Russia and also to surround China. And this AUKUS agreement, Australia UK US military alliance, was really done pretty much secretly from the American people. No debate in Congress, and apparently for the US Congress there's an unlimited budget for the US military. Whatever they want, they get. And at the same time, they're cutting off money from COVID, from other health needs that the American people have, and are pushing for more war. So the trade unions in Australia, the majority of trade unions, the Maritime Union of Australia, the Education Workers Union in Australia, public workers in Australia are opposing this base, are opposing this military alliance, and we solidarize with them here in San Francisco. They need to know that they're American people, American workers who are against militarization, and this will be the beginning of an education campaign in the United States to rally the labor movement, educate people, first of all, about the danger of this war in the base and militarization of Asia, because this is a whole threatens world war. And one of the things about the United States, it has a long history. It's the Australian consulate here. One of the things about the history of the United States and Britain and these other countries, they have a long history of invading countries and setting up basically bases in China. As a matter of fact, China was treated as a colony of the United States and the imperialists for many years. The Opium Wars were wars actually to occupy China. China refused to have opium. So this has a long history. And the other factor that's important for people to understand here is that both the Democrats and Republicans are united. It's a bipartisan policy to support the war machine. The U.S. government has unlimited money for war. At the same time, the infrastructure here is falling apart. The homeless are growing. There are airline collapses like Southwest Airlines. There are railroad wrecks like in East Palestine, where people are contaminated because they don't have enough health and safety on the railroads, yet they have an unlimited budget for war. It's called imperialism. It's called capitalism. That's really what we're talking about. The war profiteers, the military-industrial complex in the United States is really focused on spending all our wealth in this country for war, for profiteering, and that's what the war in Ukraine is about. The United States wanted to privatize and wants to take over Ukraine and actually use that war to attack Russia, to break up Russia. So this is what we're talking about, and this is why we have this action today in front of the Australian consulate. So our first speaker is Michael Wong. He is a veteran, and actually he's been a fighter most of his life against war and against militarism, starting with the Vietnam War. So welcome, Michael Wong, who's Vice President, speaking as an individual of Veterans for Peace.
Hi, my name is Michael Wong. I'm the Vice President of the San Francisco chapter of Veterans for Peace, and I'm also the National Vice President of Veterans for Peace. I think Steve put it very well. This submarine base that they're talking about in Australia is just one small part of a global war on the rest of the world for the United States to try to dominate the entire world. It's a part of a global strategy of the U.S. to build bases all around China and to build bases all around Russia and to take down any country that is independent of the United States and is able to follow their own choices, their own path towards their own development, regardless of the orders of the United States. When the United States talks about the international rules-based order, they're really talking about the United States gives the orders and other people obey. The real rules-based order of the world is supposed to be international law and the United Nations, not the United States. The United States is spending all our money on our last grasp of the colonial period, in which the Western nations dominated and controlled most of the world. They've lost the political war. They've lost the guerrilla wars in Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, and now they're going for world war with Russia and China, and they're ramping up war all around, making excuses, using, quote, human rights as an excuse to wage war against millions of people. And this risks nuclear war. There's no reason for Australia to have nuclear submarines or nuclear bases. China is Australia's greatest trading partner. So why do they need to defend themselves from China? China is not going to attack them. China wants to trade with them. They claim that China's a threat to Australia. That's ridiculous. China in 5,000 years has never invaded Australia. That's completely absurd.
Brian McWilliams, former president of the ILWU, couldn't be here today, but Brian McWilliams has written a statement against militarization in Australia, against the destruction of the Port of Kembla, and also we are going to be working here with the ILWU and the unions to fight against militarization of Asia. This is a real critical task. So our next speaker is Charlie Minster, a retired member of the laborers. Welcome, Charlie.
My name is Charles Minster, retired laborers and longtime union activist. First off, of course, certainly U.S. out of Australia and U.S. out of Asia and Australia. PM Albanese took a trip to the United States in November and met with Biden and the British Prime Minister in San Diego. And he also turned over $3 billion to the U.S. from Australia's taxpayers to help build the bases that are going to build the submarines that they're selling to Australia at a cost of, it's going to cost them $360 billion. That's Australian dollars, $360 billion that is going to be paid to the U.S. and Britain for the building of these submarines. I believe it's 12 submarines over a period of years. And of course, building the shipyards that are going to build the ships, these submarines. Nuclear submarines that are going to be nuclear armed, no doubts. Now, the cost of the deal, by the way, they had to pay France $830 million for canceling a deal they had with France to build nuclear submarines, again, from the working people of Australia's pockets. Now, I want to salute President Keating of the Marine Union of Australia, Mariners Union of Australia, for his May Day speech in which he condemned this spending of money and building submarine bases in Australia. But it's going to take a lot more than words to stop this. And what it would mean is political strikes against the Australian Labor Party, which is brokering this deal. All right? This is the Australian, quote, Labor Party that is brokering in this deal for the building of these submarine bases and submarines to be stationed in Australia to threaten China and all of Asia. So again, I call on the brothers. We stand with you in opposition to this attack and this gift to the warmongers around the world. But we also ask you that you do political strikes to stop the installation of these bases and these submarines, because it's going to take more than words to stop something like this that threatens World War III. Thank you.
How many U.S. nuclear submarine bases do we need in the world? I mean, I think we got too many already, but they want to build more. And kicked them out, kicked them out, kicked them out. And that base would contaminate. These nuclear bases are dangerous. They have contamination in them. There have been nuclear accidents at these bases in the United Kingdom, but they want to build more bases. So our next speaker is Ricardo Ortiz. He was a labor researcher and been struggling against the occupation of Puerto Rico, which another country that was invaded by the United States, to bring democracy. Welcome, Ricardo.
This building of an American Australian nuclear submarine base is one of a long list of Australia's militarism that goes along and in partnership with the United States. Let's start mentioning some of these military interventions that the Australian imperialists have done. In the Korean War, Australia sent troops to Korea. During the Vietnam War, they sent troops to Vietnam. They had the so-called Australian task force. And then, right now in the 2000s, Australia sent troops to the Solomon Islands to intervene against the Solomonian island inhabitants. Australia sent troops to Tonga in 2003 to support a corrupt monarchy over there. So this is in Borneo, in Malaysia. This is the long history of Australia sending troops throughout Asia in hand with the support of Yankee imperialism. But that is not the main important thing that we're talking about. Why Australia sent troops throughout Asia, as near as 2003, 2017, as I mentioned, in the Solomon Islands. Based in Australia, they are multinational corporations. And if you haven't bothered to look, I will tell you this. One of the largest mining conglomerates in Asia is BHP, based in Melbourne, doing exploitation of workers throughout the Asian continent. So that's why the Australian government works hand in hand with Yankee imperialism. They have also their own economic international interests in the region. So what we need is an international that gathers workers' parties around the world and combat the capitalists from all nations, including Australia, and particularly right here in the belly of the most powerful, most murderous imperialist country, the United States. In Puerto Rico, we kicked out the Navy out of the island of Vieques after decades of bombing. We kicked them out. And we created a mass movement, and we still got kicked out a few remaining bases that are located in there. So our Australian brothers and sisters, they got to organize a mass movement to end up Yankee nuclear forces in the country, and also to put an end to Australians' military interventions through Asia. The Australians are accomplices of the U.S. sending troops to Afghanistan, and abroad. I will not go on because of time constraints, but I could, go on and keep showing how involved Australia is in militarism, in the arms industry, in corporate investments throughout Asia. So, workers of the world, unite. Down with capitalism. Down with imperialism.
Thank you. And one of the issues that we have to address here today is, where is the AFLCIO? Where are our unions in the United States? This is an important question for the American working class, because there should be thousands of people out here protesting another U.S. nuclear base. And we have to say that the AFLCIO is actually on the side of war. They support more military intervention. In fact, the AFLCIO is getting $75 million from the National Endowment for Democracy, NED, for its international operations. Now, why would the U.S. government be giving $75 million, which is a lot of money, to the AFLCIO quote-unquote Solidarity Center? The reason is the Solidarity Center, which operates in over 60 countries, is involved in supporting corporate unionism. They're involved in supporting unions that support imperialism and capitalism. And we say we have to stop taking money from the U.S. government. We say that we have to make them accountable. And on September the 11th, the date of the Chilean coup, which was supported by the CIA and the AFL-CIO, we will be having a rally in front of the AFL-CIO demanding accountability, demanding compensation for the Chilean trade unionists and workers who were killed as a result of that coup, and thousands were killed, and also for the AFL-CIO leadership to be held accountable, because what they're saying is the interests of the AFL-CIO are the same interests as the U.S. government. But who does the U.S. government control by? It's controlled by the bankers. It's controlled by billionaires. It's controlled by the people who are ripping off the world. I mean, this Silicon Valley bank bust was they organized the withdrawal, and nobody's held accountable. We face a major depression, global depression, as a result of capitalism. It's capitalism gone wild. And who is going to control that? It's only the working people of the United States and the world who can solve this problem. The fact that the United States is in debt, has a massive financial crisis, and yet is spending unlimited amounts of money, trillions of dollars on war, is a sign of the decline of U.S. imperialism. It's also a sign that we are facing a worldwide depression. That's what it's a sign of. And this is a danger to all working people. You already have homeless in Los Angeles and San Francisco and New York. In fact, these Democratic mayors who run San Francisco want to call in the National Guard and the police to take care of the homeless. I would say that the homeless and people who have health problems, police and the National Guard are not what's going to solve the problem. What's going to solve the problem is a system that is based on need of people, not on making military funding available for another war. That's what we face in Australia, where they want to militarize and build a U.S. nuclear base. We have to stop it, so we are going to organize in the Unions and Education campaign, and we want to urge the Australian unions, the teachers, the public workers, the maritime union, to reach out to U.S. union people, to send letters, because we have to organize. We have to move the American working class, the postal workers and other workers. We have to move them to stop these wars. Workers have the power. Workers need to have a general strike against these wars. You want to stop war? You have a general strike. And in 2008, the ILWU had a West Coast shutdown against the Iraq War. They have the power. But that means a fight to unify, and it means a fight for workers to understand that these wars will not benefit them. They only benefit the military-industrial complex, and also they mean the destruction of lives of millions of people. We want to talk about Asia. How many people were killed in Korea War? How many people were killed in Korea War? 4 million. How many people were killed in the Vietnam War? 3 or 4 million. Who did that? All the bombs that the United States dropped on these people? The Australian Army was part of that. All the people that are dying as a result of U.S. weapons in Ukraine, U.S. wants a world war. That's what we're moving towards. We have to stop it. We have to organize against war, and we have to mobilize people in the United States. Not one more penny for war. And any politician like Barbara Lee or Dianne Feinstein or Padilla, these people, these Congress people and senators who vote for war, their hands are bloody. Because when you vote for war, you're talking about killing more people around the world. That's what these votes are about.
I'm sorry I couldn't be with you. I just want to say to everybody, China is not our enemy. And I want to tell Australian councillors that China is not your enemy either. And neither is China anyone's enemy. For Americans, right now, we're trying to start a war that endangers Americans, Chinese, but everybody in the world. For America is their enemy. And we need to stop that. We need to stop our own government stop treating peace as an enemy. And we need to really consolidate ourselves, push forward a peace agenda. We cannot accept hegemony anywhere in the world, and not the least our own government right here in America. We need to stop the proliferation of weapons all over the world. And I just read that Biden has expedited $500 million of weapons to Taiwan. Does Taiwan need $500 million of weapons for? Right now, you go to Taiwan, you go to China, it's the most peaceful part in the whole world. They are enjoying peace and prosperity, and all these war and all these horrific things that they imagine that's going on are all our imagination, our creation. We need to stop that. We need to stop that kind of proliferation of weaponry throughout the world. Our main goal in America is to promote peace. And it doesn't matter whether one person or two persons join us, we will continue to speak out for peace. That's the only survival for everyone in the world. And let's stop American hegemony. Let's stop American militarization. Let's stop American colonialization and conforming all these countries that become vassal states of America and turn this whole world into a big World War III.
My name is Nadia Williams. I'm with Veterans for Peace for the last 20 years, an associate member. Veterans for Peace was founded by veterans of the American War against Vietnam. And we do a lot of work in Vietnam, policy as well as financial support for the victims of our war. The Vietnamese government estimates that 5 million were killed on all sides, mostly civilians, and an estimated 2 million people died during the 20-year U.S. embargo against Vietnam. They died of starvation, of lack of medicine, of war wounds, of Agent Orange. And actually, Agent Orange continues to cause birth defects. There's babies now in the 4th generation in Vietnam born without eyes and arms and legs. And there are disabled adults who are a huge drain on their families that must be taken care of that were born disabled. And unexploded ordnance, okay, continues to kill. So Australia was a part of that. They sent several thousand troops to Vietnam, and the South Koreans sent nearly 1/3 to the Vietnam War. They had a successful lawsuit against the chemical corporations for compensation for Agent Orange, health issues and problems against this that the South Korean troops suffered, and the small number of Australians as well were victims of the chemical weapon that the United States used in the Vietnam War. So I just wanted to correct that. This is all a train, a long train, as Steve and the other speakers have said, of aggression and oppression and exploitation of the peoples of Asia for the profit of the United States and the West. That's all. Okay.
So thank you. Because people think that wars end, like the nuclear war in the Second World War when we dropped bombs on Japan. It hasn't ended. It's still a nightmare for the Japanese people. That war remains. Nuclear weapons, and the fact that this government is saying that we need to prepare for nuclear war, and that's what they're doing, is a deadly danger. People need to learn the lessons of the Second World War when we dropped atomic bombs, hydrogen bombs on Japan. And those people, the Japanese people, are still suffering, and other people were affected by that bombs. People around the world are affected by radiation and the nuclear industry, including nuclear power plants, which are very old and are dangerous because they have radioactive waste which has no place to go. And we can talk about the Japanese government, which also wants to militarize. the Japanese government, the LDP, Kishida, they want to build more bases in Japan. In fact, they're building a base in Okinawa. I mean, the Okinawan people don't need a base. The small island has been a military base and been used in the bombing of Vietnam. So these U.S. bases are basically war bases, and they're aimed at the people of the world, and also they destroy communities where they're built, including in Port Kembla. If the U.S. nuclear submarine base is built in Port Kembla, it would destroy that as a commercial port. There would be an exclusion zone, and the people of Port Kembla would have their life destroyed by a U.S. nuclear submarine base. We can't allow that.
I just want to say one thing really briefly. Historically, we've seen how imperialism, which is a system, capitalism, imperialism, which dominates our planet, periodically enter into conflict, one imperialist nation over another. If we look at what's going on in the world right now with the existential threat of climate change and the rest, the idea that these imperialists, led particularly by the United States, which has been the main imperialist power since World War II, would plunge the world once again into war, would literally put the fate of humanity at risk. And so we really need to reach out broadly to the people and warn them about what's going on. There needs to be a powerful movement across this country and actually across this world to prevent the outbreak of another major war, which could very well mean the end to civilization or to humanity, frankly, the way we're going. But I think particularly the young people have to know that a world that's divided among capitalist, imperialist nations vying over which one can grab a little piece of territory more than the other, or this section of this resource more than the other, or this market more than the other, is total insanity. And we need to go to a new, different kind of social system where this kind of thing isn't the motive force for the way the economy runs. We need a different kind of economy. It's based on cooperation and based on mutual respect among all the peoples of the planet. This one race, the human race. Anyway, that's my point of view. Thank you.
So we're here today in front of the Australian consulate saying that the American people do not want war. The American people are opposed to war, and the American people need to organize, including the unions, against war. That we have to stop the billions and trillions of dollars. It's $1 trillion budget for war that we have in this country. And the CIA actually, which funds this group, which supports this pro-war group here, Falun Gong, they want more war, they want militarization. And that's a danger to the working people of the world. We don't need war in Asia, and that has a long history. The United States has provoked wars.
Steve's speaking right now. Go ahead.
The United States has provoked wars. They invaded since 1889 when they invaded Cuba and the Philippines, supposedly to bring democracy. The United States actually is a threat to the world peace and a threat to workers all over the world. There's a whole rise of Asian hate because Trump and those people that Biden, when they blame China, they're encouraging hate against Asians, not only against Chinese, but all Asian people. People have been killed as a result of this Asia bashing. And the Asia bashing has a long history in the United States. Asians have been excluded. In fact, there are bills in Texas to prevent Chinese, to prevent North Koreans, to prevent Iranians and other people from even owning land in the United States. So there's a long history of racism against Asian people, and the war hysteria that's being whipped up by this government is also leading to the deaths of Asian and Asian Americans in the United States. They have blood on their hands. We have to organize in the United States against the racist hate, against Asian hate, and we have to organize against militarization, which this Falun Gong who are marching today in front of us represent. They're funded by the CIA. They supported Trump, they support militarization, and they support politicians who are racist.